Now this week, EPF Account 3, could it be good? Yeah, there are some people saying that, hey, this is a bad decision because it will further deplete our savings. Some people saying that, hey, this is actually a great decision because now I can invest 10% of these funds elsewhere to generate better returns. So yeah, we're discussing about all of this tonight, the details of Account 3 and the pros and cons associated with this move. As usual, not financial or legal advice. So this is the new proposed distribution over here. What we are familiar with is the 70-30. Yeah, 70% going to account 1, 30% going to account 2. And from May onwards, specifically on May 11th, everybody will have account 3. It will receive 10% of your total contributions, which you can withdraw anytime. 15% into account 2 and 75% specifically into account 1. Now, account 1, it cannot be withdrawn until you are 55. This is considered your retirement account. And funds within account 2, yeah, this one can be withdrawn anytime, but for specific purposes to pay for your education, housing loan, and healthcare. And if you are 50, you can withdraw balances from account 2 as well. But this new structure with 10% in account 3, you can basically withdraw it anytime. And EPF says that this purpose is to replace the need for targeted EPF withdrawals. Now, a lot of the information that I've got today so far is from news sources. EPF has yet to make an official announcement because they're trying to test the market, test the waters first. So we are expecting the announcement to be live on 25th of April, and then account 3 will launch on the 11th of May. They may still be last minute changes. Now, by the way, there is no opting out based on what I know so far. You cannot say that, hey, I think account 3 is a bad idea. I don't want to have account 3 within my portfolio. It doesn't work this way. On May 11th onwards, everybody's salaries will be distributed 75 to account 1, 15 to account 2, and remaining 10% to account 3. But you can decide if you want to transfer 1/3 of your funds, or basically 10% of your entire EPF, from account 2 to account 3. Okay, let's say your EPF currently has 100,000 ringgit. Then you decide to transfer 1/3 of your funds from account 2, that's 10,000 ringgit, and then that will go into your account 3, which you can withdraw anytime. So overall, my personal opinion on this is I think it's a bad idea because it will further deplete the alarmingly low savings of all members. Now this chart really just explains itself. Bumiputras, on average, they have 10 times lesser savings compared to the Chinese. And according to EPF's benchmark, Chinese people already have not enough to retire. Okay, if you take the median savings, EPF recommends at least 240,000 ringgit when you are 55. So you will have about 1,000 ringgit across the next 20 years. Yet, the Chinese people, despite having 10 times or 6 to 8 times higher median savings compared to the Malays, were not even close to this minimum benchmark over here. Yeah, and that leads to about 182 ringgit to retire over the next 20 years. And if you take a look at the Malay population, that's even more worrying. They only have 31 ringgit across the next 20 years. And why I say this is not really a good idea is because we've done some sort of experiment, or perhaps not really an experiment. The government in the past 1 or 2 years during the height of the COVID pandemic, they opened 4 EPF withdrawals, and citizens, when given the choice to immediately withdraw their funds, yeah, they did so. And the majority of them who have very low savings, and most of them belong to Bumiputras. When we have this account 3 over here, I'm pretty sure that quite a few people will decide to withdraw it out. Yeah, sure, some will need it for necessities to pay for their emergencies and their bills or whatnot. But there are also some people saying that, hey, my EPF currently has 30,000 ringgit inside. I'm going to withdraw that 10%, 3,000 ringgit. Let's go Vietnam. Yeah, so this is really not a good decision. Okay, make sure that if you're planning to withdraw from your country, just ensure that you're not sacrificing your future welfare. So what about thoughts from other, I would say, more famous people? Yeah, the first one being Soraya. She wrote on Twitter saying that EPF Account 3 is mainly a strategic move to keep people quiet for urging for further EPF withdrawals. Even if it's withdrawn, EPF Account 3 could be a good idea because it will somewhat reduce the reliance on loans when people are strapped for cash. Now, this point I entirely agree, But for those people who are planning to withdraw it to go for holiday, buy a new iPhone or buy a new luxury bag, that's basically not a sustainable choice. One thing for sure, EPF account 3 cannot fix core issues within our society, which is low salary in the first place. So what about other people? Yeah, this is certified financial planner and chartered financial analyst Han Liu. I decided to personally WhatsApp message him and see what he thinks about this. He's also the founder of Ringgit Plus, and he says that hey, actually account 3 is an okay idea given the circumstances. He's trying to put the genie back in a bottle, indicating that this should have never been suggested in the first place. And 10% seems high. He would have gone for 5% or so. And taking out any time is a bad idea for two reasons. Number one being a lot of people will instantly withdraw every month and they have an additional 100 or 200 ringgit depending on their mandatory contributions to splurge, right? And then this also adds a lot of burden to EPF, yeah, administratively and liquidity wise. Yeah, perhaps you're taking out 2 to 1 time per year, that will be more in line with the spirit of EPF itself, which is to assist Malaysians for a comfortable retirement. Now, all in all, there are also considered, I would say, concerns over account three's dividends. Yeah, some people are saying that account three will dish out or reward members lesser dividends. But the star says that the dividend rate is unlikely to be severely impacted. So there is one good aspect about this, I can say. If account 3 has the same dividend as account 1 and account 2, then it will probably be the number one place for citizens to store part of their emergency funds. Because you take a look at this comparison over here, yeah, conventional and Sharia EPF savings, both of them beat the majority of low risk funds out there. If EPF allows you to directly contribute only to account 3, yeah, then that will be a perfect option to store part of your emergency funds. But if let's say the voluntary contributions follow this percentage over here, then it may not be so attractive, but still, you will get tax reliefs, hopefully, for voluntary contributions. Right now, let me transition into another topic, which is how to build your portfolio. Yeah, we actually conducted this Twitter space on Monday with two financial experts, Han Liu and Sunny Hamid. And we talked extensively on how to create a well-diversified portfolio. Now, I really highly recommend everyone to go and listen to this session. It's about an hour and 40 minutes. So we started off the session talking about gold. Yeah, the asset is up 15.48% since the start of the year, outperforming even the S&P. Now, the S&P previously rallied about 8 to 10%, then has fallen quite significantly, but is still up about 5% since the start of January. But why is gold up by such a significant amount? Well, it's not only because of geopolitical tensions. It's not only because of the escalating tensions in the Middle East. The speakers also talked about central banks buying heavily, particularly China, India, and Singapore. They're all buying gold in order to diversify their treasuries as well as reduce their reliance on the US dollar. Then next one is retail investors. Yeah, this one is a bit of a surprise to me. Chinese people are actually stockpiling physical gold. And because you take a look at the Chinese market right now and the Chinese economy, it's really not going anywhere. In fact, the Hang Seng index or the Chinese stock market across the previous 1 or 2 years, I think it has fallen by 40 or even 50%. Yeah, meanwhile, the Chinese real estate market, which is one of the primary ways for the Chinese people to generate or preserve wealth, is crumbling. There's a real estate crisis in China right now. And these citizens, without anywhere to turn to, they are now stockpiling or heavily buying physical gold. So Mr. Sunny said he's not surprised if this asset rallies to $3,000 an ounce within this year, considering the current sentiment. Now, talking about gold, how many percent of it should you allocate within your portfolio? Well, these speakers recommended not more than 5 to 10%. Yeah, because this asset is used only as a hedge against inflation. And gold only works sort of like an insurance policy for your portfolio. We also talked extensively about the fundamentals of building your portfolio. Now, a lot of people, when they build their portfolio, the first thing that they think about is how many percent they want to earn per year. Like a target, let's say, I want to earn 10 to 15% per year, but actually it's the wrong step. You should first determine your time horizon as well as your risk profile. And then finally, figure out what is the best portfolio considering the first two factors. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you are planning to save for a down payment for a car in the next 2 years. So your time horizon is actually pretty short. It's only 2 years. And your risk profile should therefore be low, i.e. closer to that of a retiree, because you need that money very soon and therefore you cannot take too much risk. And therefore the returns that you should aim for is about 4 or maybe 5%. You can put it into safe assets, i.e. fixed income assets such as ASB, ASM, your cash apps, fixed deposits or whatnot. But what if you're investing for retirement, right? Let's say you have 20 to 30 years in your time horizon. In this case, you can afford to take more risk. Right? In this case, you can invest in assets such as equities, yeah, stocks, Apple, those small cap companies, or even aggressive mutual funds, right? And aim for a higher return. These are the say the risk classifications and the specific percentages that you can build accordingly. But at the end of the day, these percentages has to be decided by you. Like you have to decide your own percentages. But generally conservative, you try to aim 4 to 6% per annum, and it's 60% in fixed income, 35% in equities, and about 5% in gold. If you decide to invest in gold. Then moderate is like a 50-50. You have 50% equities, 50% fixed income, and you aim about 6 to 8% returns. And finally, aggressive, which if you have a lot of time, your investment horizon is about 20 to 30 years, and you can go for 60 to 70% equities, 30% fixed income, and the remaining 10 or even 15% you put it into gold. Now, talking about this, right, when it comes to fixed income, you should actually factor in the balances in EPF. Okay, because EPF sort of works like a fixed income fund. It's a very low risk place to store your future savings, right? It generates 5 to 6% per year. So if you're young, right, and you take a look at EPF, considering EPF balance, you should probably take up 30 or even 50% of your portfolio already. And therefore, you can see that you should take more risk in the markets in order to maximize your returns, because you already have EPF occupying quite a large portion of the safe side of your portfolio. Okay, so biggest takeaways, like what I said just now, young people, you should take more risks in your investments because you have the time. And crypto, now talking about crypto itself, 1 to 3% exposure into Bitcoin is proven to tremendously increase your returns and decrease portfolio risk. This one is actually said by Han, and he said that if you ask any chartered financial analyst to do a Markowitz portfolio for you, they will come up with the same result. So talking about the allocations itself, let's say your plan is to have a 60-40 type of portfolio. 60% equities, 30% fixed income, remaining 10% in gold. And right now you are 0% exposed in gold, and you're worried to enter into this particular asset, saying that, hey, it has actually rallied by 15.48% since the start of the year. I'm very afraid to enter right now. So rather than having a look at the current price, right, you take a look at your portfolio exposure, whether it's underexposed or overexposed. If your portfolio has 0% exposure into gold right now and your goal is to have 10%, then you can probably afford to enter 2, 3, or even 5%. And then see as the months progress where the market leads to. If gold continues to outperform, then that's good news for you, right? Because the weightage of gold within your portfolio will increase. And if it exceeds your target allocation, let's say it becomes from 10%, it becomes to 15% or even 20%, that is a signal for you to take profits off the table, rebalance it according to your target allocation. Now, conversely, if gold underperforms across the next few months, right, from about 3% of your exposure, it decreases down to 2% or even 1%, and that is also a signal for you to acquire more of that particular asset in order to increase your overall exposure. Now notice, when I talk about this strategy itself, right, never have I talked about gold's price, never did I speculate where gold will go. It's just entirely depend on how your portfolio is distributed. And at the end of the day, you completely remove the need to time the market. You just take a look at what your portfolio currently needs. Can you elaborate more on the rebalancing of portfolio? And what should we do? And what should be taken off from it if I want to consider 2 to 3% of crypto? Okay, so basically this distribution itself, like what I said just now, the percentages are not fixed. At the end of the day, you can edit them accordingly depending on your risk profile and time horizon. So obviously aggressive investors, you generally want to have more time, i.e. 20 to 30 years, and you can even have exposure 70 to 90% of equities depending on how much risk that you're willing to take. So Han sort of like during the session, he mentioned a test for you to conduct lah, in order to determine your risk profile. So you take a look at your portfolio right now, your allocations, and see if you can sleep at night. Okay, if you plan a new portfolio and you cannot sleep at night, okay, you end up waking up every day or every night taking a look at the prices of Bitcoin or perhaps gold, yeah, then that's a signal that you're taking too much risk and you should reduce the risky assets within your portfolio. If you can sleep fine at night, if you're okay, and then you take a look at your portfolio, not too worried about it, yeah, then that is probably the right risk allocation or the right percentage for you. Okay, so that's called the sleep at night test. Okay, and now you asked about taking profits, right? Okay, so within each particular portfolio itself, you can determine a deviation. Okay, a deviation as in like a 5% deviation. For me personally, is a 5% deviation. So let's say my portfolio is 60, 30, 10, like this percentage over here. And equities over the next few months, yeah, specifically the US stock market, right? It rallies from 60% to 65% of my portfolio. And I told you that my deviation, acceptable deviation is 5% just now. So that is a signal for me to cut back 65% of equities, cut it back down to 60% and rebalance it to wherever which has the weaker asset right now or the weaker weightage right now. Let's say fixed income is weaker, it has dropped to 25%, or maybe gold has dropped to 5%, then that is a signal for me to cut off this 5% and move it over to gold. So this is basically the essence of rebalancing itself. And you sort of like see, right? It's a buy low and sell high technique that really works based on your target allocations. And what is your next question? And what should be taken off from it if I want to consider 2 to 3% for crypto? Well, again, it is entirely up to you. Are you a more safer investor? Can you sleep at night or not? Okay, which one you remove? Let's say if you remove equities and you feel that, hey, I'm actually not taking enough risk. I want to maximize my returns. Or if you're those type of person that says that, hey, I removed 2 to 3% fixed income and now I don't really feel safe anymore. I cannot sleep at night. So yeah, again, it entirely depends on what you're looking for, what your risk profile is. But for me personally, I may cut off a bit from my fixed income because I already have EPF covering my back. Okay, every month, quite a portion of my salary goes to EPF, right? Specifically 23 to 24%. So your safe side or your safe investments is already covered by the retirement fund, and therefore you can afford to take more risk. So when it comes to taking profits in crypto, it's also the same principle. And let's say like what you mentioned just now, 1 to 3% or 2 to 3% crypto, right? And you have a deviation. Let's say my deviation is about 3 or 4%. So if crypto rallies to 7% of your portfolio, that is a strong signal for you to reduce that exposure, cut it back down to 3%, and move it to whichever asset that has lower weightage right now. If you are 0% exposed, yeah, if you have 0% equities, you are previously all invested into ASB, ASM, you only play with fixed deposits, right? Then you should always get exposure first and then see where the market goes in the future, right? Let's say your goal is to have 60% equities, but you're afraid to immediately dump in 60% of your portfolio into equities. Well, then just enter probably 10 or even 20% first, and then in the near future see how the market moves. If it continues to outperform, good news for you. If it underperforms, then you can actually allocate more. Another strategy is to every month you DCA, right? Let's say previously you DCA into ASB, ASM, or even fixed deposits. And now if you want to increase your exposure into equities, let's say this month you can DCA into equities. The next month, if your equity exposure is already up to your target, you can DCA into whichever asset that has the lower or the weakest weightage. If the return of EPF account 3 is lower compared to account 1 and 2, do you think it's wise to take it out and invest elsewhere, or just keep it as an emergency fund? Now, personally, I won't touch my EPF account 3. Okay, even though I have a bit of knowledge when it comes to investing, there's still a lot of things for me to learn. But I will just leave account 3 as it is. In fact, there is an option for you to move funds from account 3 to account 1 and 2. So that's what I will do basically. If account 3 has a lower dividend, all I will do is every month take that additional step, although it's tedious, move funds from account 3 back into account 1 and 2 because I will not touch it. Yeah, because at the end of the day, this occupies my fixed income portion. Okay, and I would like to keep it that way. You can also decide to take it out and invest elsewhere. That's entirely dependent on you. But there's also risk, right? So if you invest it elsewhere, if you invest it in something like crypto, a scam coin, or perhaps an aggressive mutual fund that does not perform well, yeah, then that's basically another loss that you have to take as well. Okay, but there is a chance that you will earn higher returns also. So pros and cons associated to this decision, but personally, I will not take out funds from my EPF. Okay, but there is a big difference in terms of like 5% per annum and 7% per annum. So let's say you are a conservative investor right now, despite having 20 to 30 years of investing time horizon, and your average return rate you put inside ASB, ASM every year, right, is 5%. Then using the rule of 72, right, you take 72, you divide it by 5, it will take 14.4 years for the current funds inside your ASB, ASM or whatnot to double, assuming that the return rate is 5% per year. But if you just take a bit of risk, if you just up it up a notch to 7% per year, let's say you invest a bit into aggressive mutual funds or whatnot, yeah, the time taken to double is 10.3 years, which is 4 years quicker. Okay, so again, if you have a lot of time, if you're young, make sure you consider higher risk options because it really does make a lot of difference in your portfolio. All right. Next, with this account tree introduction of liquidity, is it a good idea to contribute more voluntarily after we hit the max limit of income tax claim, RM4K? Well, this entirely depends on how the voluntary contribution is distributed. Like what I said just now, right? If you can specifically target to only voluntarily contribute to account 3, then it's basically a no-brainer, right? Because it's a flexible fund and the returns is much higher, or at least higher, than all of the conservative options out there, right? ASM only 4.79%, and if you're conventional, it's 5.63% into EPF. But if your voluntary contributions are distributed in this manner, i.e. 10% goes to account 3, 15% goes to account 2, and the remaining goes into account 1, that is not very attractive anymore already, because if you voluntarily contribute an additional 3,000 ringgit, yeah, that's only 300 ringgit that you can withdraw out anytime. Thank you guys so much for joining tonight. I will see you guys in the next session next Sunday, 10 p.m. Right, so shout out to all our current gatherer members: Andrew, Wendy, Edward, Alex, CC, Is, Urshad, Caveman Balls, Calvin, Tommy, Jinkang, Adrian, JS, Wenyan, Dean, Duhan, Sufi, Faris, Alan Jackson, Raizan, Hudson, G, Jeffrey, Lawrence, Lukman, Will, Jack, YC, Arif, and Hazik, as well as all of our learner members. Bye guys, stay safe. Good night.